Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video.
My best friend slammed her phone on my table and whispered. He says he's posting everything if I ignore him. I am Riley, 26, and my stomach dropped hard. Her eyes were red, shoulders shaking, voice stuck somewhere in her throat. She pushed the phone toward me like it burned her skin. The screen lit up again, his name, another incoming message. You listen, she said, barely breathing. Her thumb hit the speaker icon and then she froze. The voicemail started and his voice filled my tiny living room. That tone he used made my skin crawl before he even finished. You think you can ghost me after what we did? He sounded bored, like this was some normal argument. I have the videos and I swear I will share them. He laughed at his own threat like it was some joke. My friend gripped her knees and stared at the floor. I watched the little progress bar move across the screen. My brain tried to lag behind, like maybe I misheard. Nope, he repeated it, clearer, meaner, a little louder. I send one link to your job and you're done. He dragged out the word job like it tasted good. He promised to show her family everything if she blocked him. He ended with, you know I'm not bluffing, right? The voicemail clicked off and the room went weirdly quiet. She wiped under one eye and missed half the tears. I told him I was busy, she said, voice cracking. I didn't even say no, I just paused. Here is the part where I wish I was noble. Calm, wise, instantly collected, you know the type. Instead, my first thought was stupid and selfish and sharp. If he had that on her, what else did he collect? Another notification buzzed before I could say anything. New message from him, subject line full of laughing emojis. I opened it and saw screenshots of their chat history. He had highlighted every flirty line like it was evidence. You begged for it, the next message read, no hesitation. Remember that before you act innocent. My friend shook her head over and over. I didn't, she whispered, voice thin, I really didn't. I believed her instantly, and I know that sounds biased. People online always demand proof and every little detail. They were not sitting here watching her body fold in. They did not hear how his voice changed when he threatened. Another voicemail popped up while we stared at the screen. I hit play before she could stop me, hands already sweating. This time he sounded annoyed, a little out of patience. You have 1 hour to call me or I start sharing. 1 hour? He said it like a timer on a game. Like he had some twisted schedule for her humiliation. Like her panic was a minor inconvenience for his evening. She looked at me with this desperate half-hope. I thought it was just flirting, she said, almost apologizing. I trusted him for like 2 weeks and then this. She swallowed hard and asked, am I screwed now? I wanted to hug her to tell her it would vanish. Instead, my head started cataloging every risk in silence. Her job, her parents, her younger cousins who followed her online. All the people who did not need to see any of that. I can call the police, she said, then winced. She already knew what they might say, I could tell. Why send those pictures, why meet him, why trust him? Every question would land on her, not on him. Let me see everything, I said, finally moving. We scrolled through the chat, fingers shaking, breath shallow. He had asked for photos and she had sent some. Every file name felt like a small loaded gun on the screen. He described exactly where he had saved them in one message. Cloud backup, private drive, multiple copies for his security. I read that line twice, then a third time, then again. That was the moment something sharp settled into my chest. You are not calling him, I said, hearing my own voice. She flinched, then nodded, then stared back at the phone. He said an hour, she whispered, watching the clock creep. I watched with her and felt something dark rearrange inside me. This is the part I keep circling when I replay that night. Did I help because I loved her or because I was furious? Did I want to protect her or did I want to hurt him? All three felt true and I hate admitting that mix. Another message dropped in while we argued with ourselves. A short video this time, a quick flash of her face. He added the line, imagine this playing on every screen tomorrow. My friend covered her mouth like she might actually throw up. I took the phone out of her hands and locked the screen. If he wants a game, I said, heart racing way too fast. We are not playing by his rules tonight. I meant it even though I had no plan yet. Later I would look back at that exact second. The sound of the lock click, her wet eyes, my shaking fingers. That tiny decision turned into everything that followed. By the time his hour ran out, I was already loading the first card. I opened my laptop before that stub. Its deadline even ended. My friend hovered behind me, chewing her thumbnail raw. We watched the time on her screen climb past his threat. Nothing dropped anywhere yet, and my pulse pounded like something exploded. I told her quietly that silence from him was not peace. Check everywhere, she leaned closer, breath short and choppy. Inbox, socials, whatever he could use, please just look. Her voice kept breaking on random words like the air hurt. I nodded once and pulled the keyboard closer like it weighed more. In my head, I already knew this would not stay small. I typed his handle into the search bar with shaky fingers. Same letters she had shown me earlier, same smug little combo. Search results popped up in a row, one after another. Streaming account, public profile, some old comment threads on random posts. He recycled that username everywhere, like he believed nothing could touch him. I clicked the streaming link first, just following the fastest instinct. His face stared back from the banner, grinning like he owned people. Short clips sat pinned with titles about conquering and crushing and winning. He joked in one caption about fans who owe him private content. My back muscles tensed so hard I almost pushed the chair away. Is that really him? She grabbed my shoulder and squinted at the header. That is his jawline, I answered, hating that I recognized it. He bragged in his bio about being unbothered and impossible to cancel. Underneath, one viewer had commented that he was a menace offline too. That word lodged in my chest and stayed there like a splinter. I scrolled through the chat replay from an old live session. His followers hyped him up whenever he teased some vague, crazy story. He described a girl who disappeared after a hookup and laughed cold. He said he still had everything and dropped a winking emoji after. My friend put her head down on the table and whispered curses. You are not the first, my voice sounded rough and too calm. That joke is not a joke if he does this to you. She lifted her head slowly, eyes hard now instead of only scared. If he has done this before, she said, then we nail him. Her tone shifted from panic to something sharper and it jolted me. I opened a new tab and searched the handle with the word warning. Then with creep, then with block, then with stay away from. Little fragments showed in different corners of the internet, all scattered. One user mentioned a guy who pushed for explicit pictures then flipped. Another described threats about sharing clips if she refused another meeting. None of them dropped his full name, only that same digital alias. Same pattern though, same timeline, same weird obsession with control afterward. I clicked through every comment thread and took screenshots without overthinking. Every capture I saved felt like a tiny brick on my side. I did not know the plan yet, but I knew I was building. Can we contact them? She pointed at one of the posts, eyes blazing. Maybe later, I answered, because chaos from strangers would complicate everything. Right now I needed structure, even if my heart refused to slow down. I created a folder and dragged every new image into it fast. I renamed each file with dates and short notes like I was staff. I moved next to his public profile on another platform, hands buzzing. Comments under his pictures were loud, half thirsty, half irritated at his attitude. A few users called him out for ghosting after hookups like a coward. One person wrote that he recorded without asking and bragged about it. That line made my throat feel tight because now I saw the pattern. He thinks this is a game, I muttered, tapping the screen once. He collects people, keeps receipts, then dangles them whenever he feels ignored. Saying it out loud made me want to throw something heavy. My friend stared at the profile like it might bite if she blinked. He enjoys this, she said softly, and that word enjoy nearly broke me. I pushed the chair back and paced once across the room. Calling him would feed that thrill, and I refused to hand it over. Reporting him with just messages felt thin, like yelling into a void. I needed proof that he admitted everything while believing he was safe. I needed him relaxed, careless, unaware that someone watched from another angle. That thought slid into place and stayed there, ugly but effective. What if he talks more freely to someone new? I said slowly. My friend straightened, tracking my expression, trying to catch up. What are you thinking? She asked, fingers twisted together in tight knots. I already hated the idea and still could not drop it. I opened the dating app he had used to meet her originally. My old profile sat there half abandoned, dusty but still technically alive. I almost used it, then stopped with my finger over the icon. He would recognize me from photos she had shown him, even briefly. I need dead someone he did not know existed, someone he could underestimate. I am making a fresh account, I said, pulse jumping in my neck. Why, she asked, even though her eyes already guessed the answer. Because he already believes he holds all the cards with you. If another match appears, he will brag and he will slip. She swallowed hard, torn between dread and a small vicious spark. I created a new email, nothing that linked back to me. Each field I filled felt like stepping deeper into something irreversible. Username, age range, general area, a few harmless interests to seem normal. I skipped every unnecessary detail, only giving what would bait someone like him. I knew his type now because he wrote it himself in every caption. What about pictures, my friend asked, voice thin but oddly steady. We cannot use yours, obviously, or anyone you actually know. I nodded and stared at the empty avatar circle like it stared back. I hated this part the most, dragging some stranger into the trap. Still, I reached for a folder of old random selfies from distant acquaintances. In the end, I used edited shots from a model account he did not follow. I cropped them tighter, changed tiny details, blurred identifying marks slightly. Nothing perfect, just enough to slide past a casual glance from him. My chest burned with guilt even as I adjusted the final frame. I hate this, I told her, but I hate him more right now. I filled out the bio with simple lines and a hint of chaos. Short, playful, nothing that sounded desperate, nothing that sounded too polished. I added one sentence about liking bold guys who take initiative. I paused there, realizing how close that sat to his favorite trick. Then I left it anyway because bait only works if it tastes familiar. My friend watched every step like she might call it off. Her jaw clenched whenever I typed something that reminded her of earlier. We do not engage if you feel unsafe, I reminded her firm. One message from me, then we decide together what happens next. I meant it in that moment, though later I would push much farther. I hit save and the new profile went live on the app. A tiny notification flashed about being visible to potential matches nearby. I adjusted the distance settings to match where he usually searched. I remembered reading that detail from one of his bragging posts. Every slider I moved felt like tightening a net around something dangerous. Now what? She asked, rubbing her arms like the air went cold. Now we wait to see how predictable he really is, I answered. I refreshed the screen once, then forced myself to stop obsessing. Minutes stretched in strange ways as we watched the empty inbox. I did not know it yet, but I had already stepped into his favorite arena. The app chimed and his picture slid onto my screen. New match. My chest tightened so hard I almost hit unmatched by reflex. Behind me, my friend gripped the back of my chair and didn't breathe. Is that him? She whispered, knuckles bone pale on the wood. It was the same jaw, the same smug tilt to his mouth. He had already liked the fake profile before my last refresh. He found us fast, I answered, and that speed scared me more. His first message arrived before we could blink the shock away. Damn, you are trouble, he wrote, followed by a string of emojis. No hello, no question, just instant possession vibes through plain text. I felt something sour crawl up my throat as I stared at it. I forced my fingers to move and typed a light reply back. Depends who is asking, I wrote with a teasing face at the end. My friend watched each letter, ready to snatch the phone away. I hit send anyway, and it felt like stepping off a ledge. He answered with another line almost immediately, like he waited. Guy who knows how to handle a wild girl, he wrote. Then another message dropped right under it without any pause. You local, or are you just torturing me for fun? I could have ignored that last part, but I leaned into it. Guess that depends, I typed, dragging out each word on purpose. How do you handle a girl like that? I wrote, then hesitated. I added talk is free, proof is better, and pressed send fast. My friend let out a short, nervous laugh that died quickly. You sound like him, she murmured, rubbing her forehead in tight circles. I know, I muttered, hating how easy that voice came to me. Getting inside his head meant tasting how he talked, and it sucked. He sent a longer block of text that almost filled the screen. He bragged about being intense, about not wasting time on shy people. He claimed he liked girls who commit and do everything on camera. Each phrase landed like it had been rehearsed on other women already. While he rambled, I took quick screenshots with my other hand. Click scroll, stacking evidence while staying in character. Sounds risky, I wrote back, pretending to hesitate just. Enough. I usually do not share that kind of thing without guarantees. He jumped at the word guarantees like a dog hearing a bell. Guarantees go both ways, he answered, followed by another smirking emoji. I only invest in someone who understands leverage, he wrote next. That word made my shoulders tense because I knew what he meant. I pushed anyway. If I send something spicy, I typed slowly, pulse pounding hard. You are not the type to use it against me, right? I added. Had one guy go weird on me once, not doing that again. My friend flinched at that message and moved away from the chair. You're using me as the example, she said, voice shaking with anger. Yeah, I answered, eyes still on the chat, because he deserves it. The guilt slid in under my ribs anyway and made everything feel heavier. His reply took a little longer this time, which worried me. You had a dude try to pull some revenge stuff on you, he wrote. Guy sounds dumb, followed by a laughing emoji that felt like a slap. Then I am smarter than that, babe, I know how to keep things controlled. I stared at that last line and knew I had him partly. He had just admitted comfort with the entire idea, even while flirting. It was not enough for any official complaint, not yet anyway. I needed him to talk specifics, show exactly what he called controlled. So I pushed the conversation toward receipts as gently as I could. Controlled how? I asked, adding a shy emoji to soften the suspicion. Like you delete stuff or lock it up somewhere safe, I wrote. I let the 3 dots disappear and reappear twice before sending it. He answered with a little brag that made my skin crawl all over. Both, he wrote, then continued before I could react to that. I do not lose anything I want to keep, he added. Cloud backup, secret folder names, all that, then another careless laugh. I snapped more screenshots and dragged them into the growing folder. My friend paced behind me, hugging herself like she was freezing. You see that? I pointed at his words and zoomed in. That is him explaining his system in his own voice while flirting. She looked like she wanted to scream and throw up together. Make him name it, she muttered, eyes locked on the phone screen. Make him spell out exactly what he has in there, please. I nodded once, feeling my own breathing start to stutter with adrenaline. I typed slower now, careful not to scare him off too early. Kinda hot but kinda terrifying, I wrote, pretending to be nervous. Ever keep stuff from girls who disappear? I asked, adding a wink. Or do they have to behave to stay off your naughty list? He sent a reaction to that line first, some stupid shocked emoji. Then another long message arrived in several short bursts, one after another. Depends, he wrote, when a girl respects me we are cool. If she ghosts me like an ungrateful brat, I hold the upper hand. My eyes flicked automatically to my friend and she knew. Her jaw clenched so hard I thought she might crack a tooth. That is me, she whispered, pressing her hand flat over her chest. He is literally describing me while trying to pick up someone new. I made my next message sound playful even though my hands shook. So if I vanish, I wrote, you would hang on to everything. Just in case I needed a reminder who I belong to, I added. I hated typing those words, but I loved what they might pull. He took the bait with humiliating enthusiasm that turned my stomach. Kinda yeah, he answered, then followed with another line right away. Had a girl do that recently after a wild night, he wrote. She forgot I keep receipts, so now she knows better who is boss. My friend moved to the sink and gripped the edge with both hands. She forgot I keep receipts, she repeated, almost laughing from disbelief. That is literally how he texted me earlier, word for word. Her eyes were wet but blazing, and I felt my anger spike hard. I pushed once more before he could change topics or lose interest. Wow, sounds intense, I wrote, doing my best to sound impressed. Ever actually had to use your receipts or did she fold fast? I asked. Guys always claim they have power, few actually follow through. He sent a voice note instead of text, and my friend went rigid. I turned the volume down low and pressed play with my thumb. His tone came through cocky and casual, like this was a proud story. He described the girl as dramatic, then mentioned nearly sending her clips around. He did not say my friend's name, but he did not need to. He described her job type, the nights they met, the way she panicked. He talked about saving everything in more than one place for safety. Then he laughed and said one warning was enough. She snapped right into line. I saved the audio immediately and grabbed another screenshot for backup. Got him talking, I whispered, even though my voice sounded far away. The S is him admitting the threat in his own words casually. The room felt too small as the reality of that evidence hit. My friend wiped under her nose and stared at the laptop. He thinks this is charming, she muttered like she was talking to herself. He thinks making me cry is a fun story to share. Her shoulders shook once, then went suddenly still like something locked inside. I decided to raise the stakes while he still believed he controlled everything. Now I am curious, I typed, fingers flying despite the tremor. If you have that kind of leverage, what do you show me first? I wrote. You cannot just tease your power and expect me not to ask. He answered with a short delay that made my nerves fray even more. I like a girl who appreciates a man with options, he wrote finally. Maybe I give you a preview sometime, he added like he was generous. Not her face though, I am not reckless, I crop smart. That line mattered. Cropping meant intention. He was not just hoarding files, he was altering them for control. I captured it all and dropped every new image into the folder like ammo. I gave him one more push toward exposing exactly what he had done. Show me how careful you are, I wrote with another koi emoji. Blurry is fine, I added, I just like knowing my guy has trophies. I hated myself for that word, but I knew he would love it. His typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then came back several times. My heart thumped so loudly I could feel it in my throat. Finally, a file icon appeared in the chat, waiting for my tap. My friend grabbed my wrist before I could open it, eyes huge. If that is me, she whispered, I do not know if I can look. I did not blame her, not even a little, and my hand shook. Step back, I told her, nudging her toward the doorway gently. I will check it and I will close it if it is you. She backed into the hall and pressed her forehead against the wall. I tapped the file and held my breath while it loaded slowly. A cropped shot filled the screen, intimate but without any visible face. I recognized the tattoo on her shoulder immediately and felt my whole body go cold. He had trimmed out everything that could identify her directly for strangers. To him that probably felt clever, like it made him untouchable by rules. To me it looked like proof that this was deliberate, calculated blackmail. I saved the file without hesitation and named it with the timestamp and app. Once that was done, I moved to secure another piece just as important. You are insane, I wrote, keeping the tone playful despite my shaking. Now I need to see that you are not all talk either, I added. Send something of yours so I know I am not the only one exposed. He responded with a laughing reaction first, then another text bragging. Fair trade, he wrote, but I pick what you get, not you. A moment later, another file came through, marked as a private image. I tapped it and saw exactly enough to know he was now compromised too. I snapped more screenshots, not of the explicit parts but of the context. His username, the file headers, the chat lines leading directly into it. Then I saved the actual images into a separate encrypted folder on my drive. My hands moved on autopilot now because my brain was buzzing too loudly. He kept typing while I did that, still wrapped in his fantasy. See, I trust you already, he wrote, adding another string of emojis. Girls never walk away when they see what I am working with, he added. I stared at that message and realized he had just handed me his weakness. My friend stepped back into the doorway, eyes searching my face. What did he send? She asked, voice low like we were in a church. Enough, I answered, turning the screen slightly so she caught the idea. Her lips pressed together and I watched fury slowly overtake the fear. I ended the flirting with a simple stall before he could push further. Gotta run, but this is interesting, I wrote, then added a heart. Maybe you show me more later, I typed, then set the phone down. If he thought I was hooked, he would not nuke the chat yet. I opened the evidence folder and counted the pieces sitting there. Screenshots of his bragging, his explanation of storage, his threats disguised as jokes. Audio of him talking about my friend like a story for entertainment. Images proving he edited her clips and shared his own without hesitation. Looking back, this was the turning point that still haunts me. I did not just have enough to protect her, I had leverage. Real leverage, the kind he assumed no one would ever hold against him. For the first time that night, I felt the urge to use it. I opened a blank message window and my hands started shaking. Not the dating app this time, a fresh anonymous mailbox on my screen. My friend watched from the couch with her knees pulled tight to her chest. She already understood that whatever I wrote now would change Everett. Hang, are we really doing this? She asked, voice rough from crying earlier. If we ping him like this, he could blow up somewhere else. I stared at the cursor blinking in the subject line and felt my pulse jump. I am done letting him pick the battlefield, I answered, even though doubt chewed at me. I copied his direct contact from the streaming page and pasted it into the bar. Work address, the one he used to chase sponsors and clout and praise. I added his other inbox from the dating profile for good measure. Seeing both addresses in one line made the whole thing feel heavier. For the subject, I typed 3 words and then erased them twice. Finally, I wrote regarding your files and left it sharp like that. No emoji, no fluff, just a phrase that would punch his nerves. My friend sucked in a breath when she read it over my shoulder. In the body, I forced myself to keep it clean and cold. No venting, no insults, just facts I could point at later. You store explicit recordings of partners without consent when in first. Then you also threaten to share them if they do not obey. I dragged one of his own pictures into the draft and watched it attach. Nothing graphic showed in the preview, just enough to prove it was him. Beside it, I dropped the clip he had sent of my friend with her face removed. I added the chat captures where he bragged about backups in private folders. My friend flinched when her body appeared in that tiny square on screen. Blur my tattoo at least, she whispered, gripping the cushion with both hands. She was right, so I opened a simple editor and smudged the pattern. The outline vanished just enough that strangers would not recognize her instantly. While the edits processed, I kept writing the message in short, precise lines. If these materials ever surface, I typed, everything in this email goes public. You are already documented describing your storage and your threats, I continued. You are not the hunter in this situation anymore, I finished and felt a strange calm. I listed the places I could send the package if he pushed back. His employer, the platforms hosting his content, the department that handled misconduct. I did not know exactly which office yet, but I knew they existed. Just writing those targets made the power balance tilt a little in my head. Then came the demand, the part that still makes me wince when I remember it. You will erase every recording and image of this woman and others like her. You will provide proof of deletion in the form of full screen captures. You will send her a written apology acknowledging your actions were abusive. My friend sat up straighter when she read that last line on the draft. I do not know if I even want to hear from him again, she said. Then the apology is for the record, I answered, throat tight under the words. For you, for anyone else he has pulled this on, for whoever comes next. I added a deadline that mirrored his earlier stunt but pushed further. You have 24 hours to comply, I wrote, choosing the number deliberately. After that, distribution begins without further warning, I added, and my hands steadied. It felt cruel and necessary at the same time, which is a dark combination. At the end, I signed with a name that was not mine and not hers. Just 3 initials and the phrase, I am not bluffing. I hesitated before adding one more line, short and ruthless. You are the one holding contraband here, remember that when you panic. My finger hovered over the send button and my stomach knotted hard. We can close this and go straight to the police instead, I said. I meant it, even though half of me was already over the edge. My friend watched my hand instead of my face and finally nodded once. Send it, she whispered, voice hoarse but steadier than before. If he wants to play with fear, let him feel all of it. There was a small wild light in her eyes now that scared me. I clicked send and watched the progress bar crawl across the top. The message left the outbox and a tiny confirmation popped up in the corner. That little notice felt louder than any voicemail he had thrown at us. I stared at it until the screen blurred around the edges from strain. Now we were the ones with a clock running, not just him. Almost immediately my phone buzzed with a new notification from the app. He had messaged the fake profile again, asking where I went so suddenly. Do not answer, my friend muttered, hugging herself and shaking her head. If he smells something off, he will nuke everything out of spite. She was right, so I let his message sit there and go unread. Instead, I opened the anonymous inbox in another tab to watch for movement. The page refreshed once, twice, 3 times with nothing new arriving. Waiting for a predator to react is a special kind of slow torture. I tried to distract myself by organizing the digital evidence into separate sets. One fold, for his bragging, another for the clips, another for text threats. I wrote short labels on each group so a stranger could follow the story. Part of me was already preparing to hand this over to someone official. Do you think I am awful for threatening him back? I asked quietly. My friend sank down onto the rug and shook her head with force. You are not threatening to expose something innocent, she answered, staring ahead. You are threatening to expose exactly what he is proud of. The browser pinged and both of us lurched toward the laptop at once. A new message from him had landed in the anonymous mailbox finally. The preview line read, "You are making a huge mistake," which made my jaw clench. I opened it and felt my pulse jump again as his words filled the screen. He started with denial, which almost made me laugh despite everything. "You have the wrong person," he wrote, which was pathetic with his photos attached. He claimed the clips were staged, that the women knew everything was pretend. Then he accused me of trying to extort him for cash or clout. I answered with 3 short sentences and attached more of his own material. "You named your storage methods in chat," I wrote, keeping my tone flat. "You described the woman from last month in detail," I added, then paused. "You also just admitted in writing that these are actual people," I finished. My friend leaned closer as I hit send and exhaled slowly through her teeth. "He is cornered and still thinks charm or confusion will work," she murmured. Another response from him popped up before she finished talking. This time the subject line had shifted to all caps and fury. Inside, he threatened to report this harassment to the authorities immediately. He claimed he had powerful contacts who would track my address quickly. He swung back to insults, calling me obsessed and unhinged and jealous. Reading those words, I realized he still had not understood that I was not alone. I let him rant through another paragraph of empty intimidation before replying. "This is not a negotiation about my feelings," I typed, fingers hitting harder. "This is documentation of your pattern, which now exists in multiple places. As of now, you should assume nothing disappears, even if this account does." That last part was a bluff, at least at that exact second. I had not shared the files with anyone yet, only the two of us. Still, saying it out loud pushed me toward actually backing it up elsewhere. Fear works on both sides when you start playing with these lines. I included one more detail I knew would twist the knife in his ego. "One of the women you targeted is considering an official report," I wrote. "She already has your audio where you describe what you did proudly. That will sound different when someone plays it back in a uniform," I added. He went silent after that message, which somehow felt worse than his threats. Minutes passed with the empty inbox staring back while my heart thudded. My friend paced a tight line across the room, whispering fragments of curses. Every quiet second made me imagine him smashing hard drives or messaging others. "Maybe he is deleting things," she said finally, stopping near the window. "Maybe he is sending everything right now to prove he is untouchable." Both outcomes sat there like twin disasters waiting for us to discover them. I had to decide whether to trust fear or push once more. I wrote another email that cut shorter than the first two. "Here is what happens next," I began, refusing to soften it with anything. "You send a written apology addressed to the woman you terrorized," I continued. "You also record yourself acknowledging that you stored explicit content as leverage." My friend's head snapped toward me when I typed the word terrorized. "You want him on camera admitting that?" she asked, voice thin but steady. "Yes," I answered, staring at the screen, "because that cannot be spun later. A text can be twisted, a recording of his own voice is harder." In the message, I added exact delivery instructions to remove any wiggle room. He had to send the apology and the recording from his known addresses. He had to affirm that he erased every file related to her specifically. He had to confirm he would never contact her again under any account. To make sure he understood the stakes, I restated the earlier threat clearly. "If I see any sign of retaliation, these materials go out in bundles. One package to your employer, one to administrators, one to platform security. Copies will also be held by other people who already know your name." This time that last part was not a total bluff anymore. While the message sat in drafts, I forwarded a smaller set to my own backup account. Just a handful of key pieces, not everything enough to survive a crash. Hitting send on that forward felt like locking a door behind us. Then I sent the new terms to him and leaned back in the chair. My shoulders ached from tension and my eyes burned from staring at screens. My friend lowered herself onto the couch and covered her face with both palms. We waited in a heavy silence that made every small device sound too loud. When his answer finally arrived, it was only one short question. The subject line shrank back to regular letters, which told me a lot. Inside he had written, "What exactly do you want from me? Nothing else." He dropped the tough act, and for the first time he sounded genuinely afraid. I answered his question with one short line. What I want is proof you erased everything and stopped. No extra words, no threats, just that clean demand. My finger hovered over the trackpad while my heart hammered anyway. His reply crashed into the inbox before I could blink. 7 lines of insults, all caps in the middle, scattered punctuation. He called me obsessed, unstable, pathetic for defending some random hookup. By the end, he promised lawyers, restraining orders, and digital investigations. My friend read over my shoulder and let out a rough laugh. He really thinks grown men in suits will clap for this, she muttered. I zoomed in on one sentence that almost made me choke. You are harassing me over private material I earned, he had written. Earned? That word hit me harder than any insult he threw. I highlighted it, grabbed another screenshot, dropped it in the evidence folder. Every time he opened his mouth, he handed me another loaded line. Another message landed before we finished processing the first one. Now he claimed the clips were art and mutually beneficial content. He insisted she had begged him to record everything for his channel. The desperation bled through his bragging, and that mix told me plenty. I answered with clinical precision, even though my hands were trembling hard. Her consent was not ongoing, I wrote, keeping my tone stripped and steady. She withdrew it when she pulled away and you punished her, I added. Any distribution after that is a different crime, I finished and meant it. While we waited for his next outburst, my friend started pacing again. She could pull everything if she had behaved, she said, quoting him. She dragged her fingers through her hair and stared at the wall. He thinks I misbehaved, she whispered, because I got scared and stopped. Another email slammed into the thread with a huge subject line again. You do not understand how this world works, he wrote at the top. Underneath he talked about girls who use men then cry later. He wrote that this was high-level game and she lost. Then he made the mistake I had been waiting for all night. I have plenty of content from other girls that never complained, he wrote. He listed a rough number, higher than I expected, almost casual. He added none of them ran to mommy or cops when I pushed. My fingers went numb for a second and I just stared. Did he seriously just admit that in writing? My friend asked, voice sharp. I grabbed another screenshot and flagged it with 3 red exclamation marks. That line right there, I said, belongs in front of someone official. This is where my stomach twisted in a different way. Going to the police meant dragging everything into fluorescent light and judgment. It meant strangers hearing about positions and camera angles and shaky decisions. It meant listening to sighs when someone thought she should have known better. Do you want this on record? I asked, looking straight at her. I will back you either way, but that part is yours. She stared at the inbox, jaw clenched, eyes shining but not spilling. Then she nodded once, slow but solid, like dropping a weight. I do not want him doing this to some 18-year-old, she said. That is what keeps hitting me, she added, voice barely above a whisper. It is already bad that I got sucked in at my age. The thought of a kid dealing with this makes me feel sick. That was the moment my own fear shifted into something colder. I opened a new tab and searched for the local non-emergency number. Dialing felt worse than messaging him, which surprised me more than it should. My thumb hovered over the call icon and then pressed down hard. When the operator answered, my voice came out too fast and shaky. I forced the words into a simple explanation, short and direct. There was a guy with intimate recordings, threats, and proof in writing. We had saved everything, and one of his targets was in my living room. They transferred us to someone who handled online exploitation cases specifically. The man on the line spoke slowly, like he was used to panic. He asked if we were safe in that moment and if he knew our address. After we confirmed the basics, he offered 2 options in that same tone. We could submit everything through an online portal and wait for review. Or we could come in that night and talk to a detective. Waiting sounded safer and less humiliating, I will not lie. But we had already spent hours dancing around his threats and promises. Let us go in, my friend said, tugging on her sleeves nervously. I do not want to sit home refreshing my email all night. I agreed before my fear could build another wall in my chest. The man on the phone gave us the address and a case number. On the way out, I copied the entire evidence folder to a small drive. I slipped it into my pocket and checked that it sat firmly there. Then I forwarded the most important screenshots to a cloud account again. Paranoid maybe, but losing everything now would have broken something inside me. We sat in the car in the parking lot for a full minute. Neither of us moved, both staring straight ahead at nothing. Last chance to change your mind, I said, hand on the door handle. She took a shaky breath, wiped her cheeks, and stepped out first. Inside, the reception desk worker looked tired but not surprised by our story. People like him walk through their files every week, that became clear. We did not get disbelief, we got forms and a waiting area. My friend squeezed my wrist so hard I could feel her pulse. While we waited, my phone buzzed nonstop in my bag beside me. I pulled it out once and saw his name filling the notification list. He alternated between rage and sudden fake concern in the preview lines. Talk to me, one message read, before you do something you regret. I silenced the phone and placed it face down on the chair. Then I changed my mind and flipped it back over again. If he incriminated himself more, I wanted a record of the timing. Every new vibration felt like a drumbeat marching towards some breaking point. A woman in plain clothes finally called my friend's name through the doorway. We both stood and almost collided with each other in the narrow hall. The woman introduced herself with a short nod, then looked at our faces. "Which one of you is directly affected?" she asked, already scanning for signs. My friend lifted her hand halfway and then let it drop. "I am," she answered, voice small but clear enough to carry. I stepped closer and held out the drive with a tight grip. "I am the one who baited him into talking," I added, pulse racing. The detective raised an eyebrow at that part, then gestured us inside. She led us into a compact room with 2 chairs and a table. She powered on a computer and plugged in the drive with practiced movements. "Tell me what you have and how you got it," she said. I started with the threats because that framed everything else cleanly. His ultimatums, the countdown, the clips he waved over her head. My friend stared at her hands as I spoke, cheeks burning with shame. The detective did not flinch, she just clicked through folders and nodded occasionally. When I got to the fake profile, my stomach clenched again. "I know that part is messy," I admitted, heat creeping up my neck. "I pretended to be someone else to make him brag," I continued. "I also got explicit content from him in the process," I finished. The detective paused, then turned the monitor slightly so we could see. "This is not ideal," she said, "but he is the one exploiting. Your method will be messy for court, not useless," she added. That small distinction did not erase my guilt, but it stopped the spiral. She played the voice note where he described my friend as dramatic. Hearing his voice in that room made my skin crawl all over again. The detective's expression did not change, but her grip on the mouse tightened. "Save that clip separately for me," she said, and marked down the timestamp. Right then, my phone buzzed again on the table between us. Without thinking, I unlocked it and opened the newest email from him. The subject line read, "You are not the only one I can ruin." The detective leaned in closer before I could even scroll down. In the message, he ranted about girls who owe him silence and loyalty. He mentioned a bunch of others who had sent things he still owns. He wrote that if one of them tried to scream victim, he had evidence. He even used the phrase backup folder of crazy exes, which made my chest hurt. The detective looked at us, then at the screen, then back. "Forward this to the case address right now," she instructed, tone tighter. "That language matters, especially when he talks about multiple targets." I sent it with shaking fingers while she typed something into her notes. "Here is the deal," she said, folding her hands on the table. "We will document everything you brought, including the parts you are ashamed of. You both will give statements separately so details line up cleanly," she continued. "In the meantime, do not respond to him at all, no matter what." I nodded, but a guilty thought slid through me anyway. I had threatened him earlier, and I did not know how that would sound. Not only to courts, but to myself when this thing settled. Part of me had enjoyed watching him panic, and I hated that. They moved my friend to another room to record her version in full. I stayed where I was and walked through every step with the detective. The dating app, the fake account, the screenshots, the humiliating files. She did not judge, but every detail felt like peeling off a scab. When we finally stepped back out into the lobby, it was late. My eyes ached, my throat hurt, and my limbs felt heavy. My friend collapsed into a chair and let out a shaky breath. My phone buzzed one more time, and this time I let the detective see it first. The detective grabbed my phone before I could unlock it. Her thumb slid the notification open while my friend held her breath. His new message filled the screen with a wall of frantic text. By the second line, the detective's jaw tightened enough to change the air. "He just threatened again," she said, tapping the top of the email. "He is talking about what he will do if you snitch." She turned the phone so we both saw the exact wording. "If I go down, a few girls go down with me," he'd written. My friend clamped a hand over her mouth and stared at the floor. "Does that help or hurt?" she asked through her fingers. The detective exhaled once, sharp, like she had seen this pattern before. "It helps," she answered, "because he is tying consequences directly to cooperation." She stepped out with my phone and the drive tucked under her arm. We sat alone in the lobby again, hearts racing in the quiet. For the first time that night, I felt smaller than the process. Like the whole thing had moved out of my hands and kept rolling. I am not proud of this, but part of me panicked. Not because I wanted him free, but because I lost my script. Up until then, I had been steering moves like a messy game. Now real systems were involved, and they do not always reward intention. The detective came back with another officer trailing behind her. They spoke in low voices near the doorway, glancing over at us. I caught bits and pieces enough to know they were escalating. Words like warrant and digital unit and devices floated over in fragments. She walked back to us with a different energy in her shoulders. "Here is what is going to happen tonight," she said calmly. "We are forwarding this to the on-call team that handles searches. Based on what he just wrote, we have enough to move fast." My friend leaned forward, elbows on her knees, eyes locked on her. "Does that mean you go to his place?" she asked, voice tight. "It means we secure his hardware before he has time to purge," the detective answered. "If he has other victims hiding in there, we want them found." Hearing the word victims in plural made my stomach twist again. I thought of that line about a bunch of others in his email. Suddenly, this was not just about my friend and my reckless trap. We were now standing in the doorway of a lot of ugly secrets. They kept my phone for copies and gave me a written receipt. "We will duplicate everything and return your device tomorrow," the detective explained. "You will both be contacted when we have more concrete steps," she added. "In the meantime, block him everywhere and do not answer anything." Out in the parking lot, the night felt quieter than it should. My friend leaned against the car and laughed once, short and bitter. "I thought I would feel better walking out of there," she said. "Instead, I feel like I just signed up for a long storm." She was right, of course. There is no quick win button for this kind of damage. Still, there was a tiny sliver of relief under all the tension. For the first time since his first voicemail, someone else carried part of it. The next morning, I woke up to 3 new emails from the detective. One confirmed they had mirrored my files and secured his ongoing messages. Another asked for the login for the fake profile I had created. The last one was short, almost casual, and hit the hardest. "We executed a warrant at his address this morning," it read. "Multiple devices collected, ongoing review, we will update you," it continued. He was not arrested yet, but they had stepped into his real life. That image alone made my chest loosen just enough to breathe deeper. A few hours later, my friend forwarded me an email from an unknown account. No greeting, no sign-off, just a single attached document in one line. "They told me to send this," he had written, nothing else at all. The attachment was a formal apology drafted within an inch of its life. He admitted to storing recordings without ongoing permission but couched it in excuses. He wrote about miscommunication and blurred boundaries and unhealthy online habits. He apologized for any distress instead of naming what he actually did. It read like something filtered through an attorney, not a real conscience. My friend stared at it on her laptop and shook her head. "This is not for me," she said, voice L. Oh, and fled. "This is for whoever will read it in a file later." She pressed forward anyway and hit download, then dropped it into her own folder. Another email from the detective arrives that evening with more careful language. They had found more than one folder matching his brag about backups. Several involved different women, some clearly younger than my friend and me. They were now working to identify them without exposing details unnecessarily. Reading that made me feel 2 things at the same time. One was a twisted sense of vindication that we had been right. The other was this heavy guilt that I had only moved when it touched us. I kept thinking about all the earlier comments calling him a menace. "That is not on you," my friend said when I confessed that later. "You cannot fix what you never knew for sure," she added. We acted when we had proof, not gossip, she reminded me. I nodded, but there was still a sour taste that would not leave. His public accounts started glitching over the next few days. First, his streaming channel went offline without any explanation posted. Then his main profile vanished, replaced with a generic suspension notice. Screenshots of his old posts floated around for a while, then slowed. You would think that part would feel like a movie win. Bad guy loses his platform, victims cheer, world applauds, credits roll. That is not how it actually lands inside your body, at least not mine. Instead, I kept checking over my shoulder like he might appear anyway. We met with the detective again a couple weeks later for an update. She explained they were pursuing charges related to unlawful recordings and extortion. She also mentioned that my messages might come up if this went to trial. Your threats will probably be framed as panic, not malice, she said. I laughed awkwardly when she said that because I was not sure. Yes, I had acted out of fear for my friend, that part is true. But there had also been a fierce rush when he finally sounded scared. I do not like that part of myself, and it is still there. Did I go too far? I asked her once my friend stepped outside. The detective studied my face for a second before answering slowly. You pushed back against someone who abused power for a long time, she replied. Could your choices complicate things legally? Sure, but his pattern stands on its own. That answer did not wash everything clean, but it steadied me. I realized I kept trying to turn this into a simple moral equation. Hero, villain, clear lines, everyone neatly sorted into their roles. Real life does not care about that kind of clean story, unfortunately. My friend started therapy after all of this, which she let me mention. First session left her drained, but she went back anyway the next week. She texted me afterward, he is not in my head for free anymore. That line stuck with me harder than anything the detective ever said. As for me, I deleted the fake profile the day we left the station. I removed the app from my phone a little later, more symbolic than necessary. I kept the evidence folders, though, backed up in more than one spot. Not because I want to stare at them, but because I refuse to forget. Sometimes I replay that night from the beginning and question every move. If I had never catfished him, would he have detonated anyway? If I had stayed silent, would my friend still be waiting for the blow? If I had pushed harder, would more women have come forward sooner? I do not have clean answers for any of that, and it bothers me. Here is what I know, the only part that feels solid. He is no longer sitting behind a screen deciding who gets terrified next. He is finally the one explaining himself to people who are not impressed. My friend still jumps when her phone buzzes in a quiet room. I still tense up when I hear a certain tone in a guy's voice. We are not magically healed because his platforms disappeared and his devices got seized. We are just two people who dragged one predator into the light and walked away changed.